I'm a fan of the Atheist Experience, and I also like listening to debates on the existence of God. And I like to try to give my responses to what the theists say and see what I would come up with. And usually...
You want to try out an argument, huh?
Yeah.
Okay.
Usually Matt or Dawkins or whoever, it blows me away with what they say. But I do have one response that I think is valid that I haven't heard from other people, and I'd like to just lay it out for you and see what you think.
Go for it.
All right. So this is basically in response to the cosmological argument. And the starting point for that, the driver for that argument, essentially is you can't come up with something from nothing, which one of the earlier callers said. And so the cosmological argument goes through and says you need a cause for the universe, and then the theist will say that God is that cause, the first mover, and that before the universe existed, there was God, and God created the universe.
Okay, I apologize, Rick. I need to clear up some confusion real quick. So there's not a cosmological argument. There's a category of arguments that are cosmological arguments. Probably the most famous, popular one being the Kalam, which is everything that begins to exist has a cause for its existence. Those are subtly, categorically different from first mover, prime mover arguments. So I wanted to get that out there. I need you to be pretty clear about which argument you're addressing and what your response is, just so that I can get it in my head.
Okay. The core of what I'm going after is the God of the first cause, and I'm not sure how to be real precise about that.
So in the sense of there could not be an infinite causal change, so there must be some first cause.
Right.
Okay.
And I'm mostly addressing the theist, what the theists propose as the cause.
Okay.
Which, I hear William Lane Craig talk about it, and he says it's an immaterial, spaceless, timeless, personal, enormously powerful being.
Yeah, all this baggage gets brought in, usually at that point.
Yeah, right. But what I want to focus on is the enormously or maximally powerful God, as opposed to the omnipotent God, which, is generally not promoted these days because of the contradictions. Can you create a rock too big for him to move?
Well, you've realized now that you've moved pretty far away from the cosmological argument, which basically just says there's a cause and we're going to put that label on it and call it God. And now,
that's right.
now we've somehow got a whole lot more stuff there.
But that's what the theists do, right? That's what
and they ought to be called on it, to be sure.
Right, and so that's what I'm trying to do, is call them on it.
Okay.
So they say there's this maximally powerful God which can do anything that's not impossible. Or another way to say it is he can't do
He has all power that is not logically contradictory.
Right. But the starting point of this whole argument is the idea that you can't create something from nothing. So they're proposing a God that can do anything that's not impossible when they just said it's impossible to create something from nothing. I think that's an inherent...
It's a special pleading that happens usually there, right? But this God has this property that he's eternal.
Right.
So there's two problems here. One is that when they say something can't come from nothing, what they mean is something can't come from nothing on its own. And the other thing is, you could argue that even with a maximally powerful God, he's not creating something from nothing. He's creating something from that maximally powerful being.
Well, that's kind of where I'm headed.
Okay.
Because, I don't think that William Lane Craig would say that he creates it from that being, but that's kind of where I'm headed, because if he's maximally powerful, can't do the impossible, and it's impossible to create something from nothing, then...
No, it's not. So this is the thing. They're not saying it's impossible to create something from nothing. They're saying it's impossible for something to come from nothing on its own.
Right.
That's different. That's two different things. It's impossible.
But
I could say it's impossible for this phone to rise 3 inches off the table. That does not mean that it's impossible for me to raise it 3 inches off the table. And that was more like 6, but... Oh, crap, I just caught a cord. Are you there?
I am. Yeah.
Okay. I thought I broke the whole phone system for a second.
So are you saying that William Lane Craig would say that God can create something from nothing?
Well, I don't... So first of all, I would say that William Lane Craig would claim that God can do anything that's logically possible. And so if it is possible for God to create something from nothing, then of course God can do that. But Craig also isn't necessarily making assertions about what it's possible for God to do, because in some cases that would put him co-equal with God. But primarily I only hear Craig ever defend the Kalam, and not as much this creation ex nihilo stuff. So, and since Craig refuses to debate me because he's afraid,
right.
I can't really answer that. We'd have to have a debate for that to happen.
Well, what I would like to hear is...
By the way, I need to clarify that. I need to clarify that real quick. That's a joke. Craig has policies about who's going to debate about whether or not they have terminal degrees. I'm not seriously suggesting that he's afraid of me, but I've been taunted all week about me being afraid to debate somebody who didn't bother to call in today or didn't get through. I don't know. So I threw that out as that joke. I don't think that Craig is actually afraid of me.
Okay, well, I would love to hear a debate between the two of you.
Me too. Me too.
So what I would like to propose to somebody who's going down that argument is a creator God that results in an atheist universe or a godless universe. And that is, the God that exists before the universe and
ceases
wants to create the universe, but has nothing but himself to create the universe from. So, so that the Big Bang is the instant when God transitioned. I like to think of it as kind of a phase change into the universe, into the energy and matter.
Yeah, no. What you're talking about, Rick, is a perfect rebuttal to a number of different versions of cosmological arguments, because they reach the conclusion that there has to have been this being in order to start everything off. But that in and of itself doesn't mean that that being still exists, because that being could have ceased to exist at the moment of creation. It would satisfy their argument, which is already fallacious in the first place, or it's not sufficient to convince you. So the only thing they could ever hope to prove is that once upon a time, prior to the beginning, there was this thing. They cannot prove that it's still there. But Craig...
It's basically saying the universe is eternal, right?
Well, Craig and others have gone down this route a little bit to point out that this God is required to sustain the universe as well. And that's something you have to hold their feet to the fire on, because all of this just gets back to, oh, well, we can't imagine it would work any other way. I can't imagine how it would work any other way. And that's what they all boil down to.
Yep. Special pleading, arguments for ignorance.
In my estimation, the definition of God that they have, that is immaterial, spaceless, timeless. What do we know that's immaterial?
Nothing.
What do we know that takes up no space?
Nothing.
And the same with timeless. But not that we don't know anything that fits that definition, is that definition is the definition of nothing.
Yeah. Not only that, but how can, if there's no time, nothing can be done.
Right.
If there is no thing, there is nothing to act and nothing to act upon. And Tracy's made this point as well as anybody.
What they're saying is something can't come from nothing except for God.
Yeah.
Well, except God didn't, in their view, God didn't come from anything. But they are defining a God that is, they are talking about a God that under the limitations you put in there is co-equal with nothing.
Right, exactly. Yeah, that's essentially a joke, because what they're claiming God is nothing.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's what I had.
Which makes them atheists, I guess.
Cool. Thanks, Rick. I'm going to try and get a couple more callers in before we go to dinner. Appreciate your time.
Thank you. Have a good night.